SLCC students take to the mic and talk nutrition. Stay here right now. What's Bruin starts. Welcome to What's Bruin. I'm your host, Mina Rivera. What's to do with nutrition? What is a diet? What to eat, not to eat, how much? Today here on What's Bruin, Teresa Chaikowsky asked students their knowledge on these questions. Then she went to a registered dietitian, Carla Alba, to find out how much of the students' answers were accurate.
I went to the Taylorsville, Redwood, and South City campuses to find out how much students knew about nutrition. Then I visited Carly Alba, a clinical outpatient dietitian at Intermountain and an adjunct professor at SLCC.
How would you define a diet?
A diet, I would say, is just your general eating habits.
A diet is a set of plans of meals based on your body and your goal.
A good balance of some good fats and veggies, fruits, healthy and I guess more healthy outweighing the not so good.
As a dietitian, I define a diet as just a pattern of eating. So somebody might have a more plant-based diet. They might eat more plants, or somebody might have, follow a Mediterranean style diet. Regardless of one's dietary pattern, it's a long-term pattern. It's not something that's done for a short period of time. At least it shouldn't be. It should be something that's sustainable, realistic, over a longer period of time.
So what is the difference between saturated and unsaturated fat?
I'm taking organic chemistry now, and I can tell you from the chemical point of view, saturated fats have double bonds or triple bonds in them, and then we tend to store them in our tissues. And unsaturated fats have single bonds, and I know they're very good for you, versus saturated fats are bad for you, and they just add more fat to us.
Saturated fat is the bad type of fat, and you want unsaturated fat as the healthy alternative.
Like saturated fat is like full of trans fats, I think, something like that. And unsaturated fats are more easier to digest, if I remember right.
Saturated fat is like a fat that could be liquid at room temperature, and unsaturated fat is like the opposite way, I guess.
So the name saturated and unsaturated comes down to the molecular structure of those fats. A saturated fat has a certain level of double bonds compared to an unsaturated fat. But really what that looks like in our food is how solid it is. So saturated fats are more of your solid fats. This is things like butter, lard, the fat on a steak. These are the types of fats that ultimately are going to increase the risk of heart disease or stroke. So it's important to limit those types of fats. Then we get to unsaturated fats that have at least one double bond in their structure. That's what makes them unsaturated. They tend to be more of your liquid fats. So this would be things like olive oil or other liquid oils, or the fish oil. So the oil that you see when you cook salmon, for example, would be an unsaturated fat. These are more heart healthy. So these are the types of fats that we want to emphasize more in our diets.
Are there any good habits for eating at fast food restaurants?
Yes, a good habit is to not eat at fast foods too much, but just once in a while is nice, treat yourself.
There definitely is ways to have good habits by I'm looking at what's in it and kind of the sodium and other things like that. So there are good ways to make good choices. It's just a lot harder depending on the fast food place.
I guess they have yogurts and oatmeal, but who really gets them?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I recommend to do to maintain a healthy, diet with moderation that can include fast food. One of those things is to look for the sodium content in different meals. So if it's available online, I recommend looking up the menu ahead of time to see how much, sodium, saturated fat, and maybe added sugar is in some restaurant meals. So that's one thing to watch for is those kind of nutrients that we want to be careful about. And then if that's not available, or another good recommendation is also if there's a plant food available as a side, like a vegetable for a side or some apple slices or something like that, that's a good way to introduce more balance and variety into fast food. Another good recommendation would be to watch portion sizes. fast food and restaurants tend to have larger portion sizes, so maybe packing up some of the meal to take home later can help watch portion control on that too.
How much protein does an adult need?
Ooh, gosh. Less than you might think, is my guess.
I think it depends on your level of activity, but I think around probably like 100 grams or something is good for if you're trying to build muscle.
It is 0.8 kilograms per kilo.
Protein is one of those things that varies so much depending on the person. It's going to depend a lot on factors like if the person is growing, if they're sick, if they have a chronic disease, if they have a lot of inflammation in their body, for example. So for the general public, for a healthy adult, the recommendation's around 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That might increase to 1 gram of protein per kilogram or 1.2 depending on if the person's, sick or trying to build muscle, for example. In general, it could vary anywhere between, 50 to 100 grams of protein, which is a pretty wide range.
So according to Alba, a healthy person weighing 130 pounds needs at least 47 grams of protein per day. A healthy person weighing 150 pounds needs at least 54 grams of protein per day. To put the grams of protein into perspective, 23 grams of protein is approximately equivalent to 3 to 4 ounces of meat, which is the palm of your hand or a deck of cards. Alba offers some suggestions for protein sources.
Yeah, when we think of protein sources, most of the time we think of animal proteins like meat. So of course things like steak and chicken, poultry, lunch meat, ham, all of those things are going to be a good protein source. Also things like fish. Also dairy is a good protein source. So Greek yogurt especially, or cheese or cottage cheese supplies some protein. But we can also get protein from plant sources. So nuts and seeds are a really good protein source. Peanut butter, which I'm a big fan of. Also legumes and lentils are also some great plant-based sources of protein. So you can get protein from animal and plant sources. There's a few different things you can do for snacks on protein. My recommendation is always to pair multiple food groups together for a snack to make it more filling and more balanced. So a good example might be an apple with peanut butter. The peanut butter would supply the protein. Or some cheese and crackers, and the cheese would supply the protein. Some people like to do fruit and cottage cheese, and then the cottage cheese would be a protein source. So those are a few examples of some balanced snacks.
For those that are vegetarians or vegans, Alba offers a few suggestions.
Yeah, protein is definitely a concern. Like I said, you can get some protein from plant-based sources. Some other concerns would be some micronutrients, so some vitamins and minerals, particularly vitamin B12, we only find in animal sources naturally. So that could be a potential concern for those who don't get animal products, mostly vegans. Vegetarians can get B12 from things like eggs if they eat eggs or dairy. So B12 is one, iron is another common concern, and zinc is another one, for example. So there's a few vitamins and minerals that a more plant-based diet would lack a little bit of.
And they would need to do supplement of some sort.
Supplement or fortified foods to make sure that they're getting enough.
Does it matter when and how often you eat?
I think it varies for everyone.
Just kind of eat when you're hungry is kind of my state of mind.
Yes, it does. Especially breakfast, and I'd say early in the morning when you wake up. And then also, don't eat before going to sleep. I'd say before 6 o'clock is a perfect time because it gives your body time to digest the food, and then when you go to sleep, it's perfect.
Great question. I'm an advocate for smaller and more frequent meals. There's a few reasons for that. Every time we eat, our metabolism is stimulated, and it also affects our digestion. So it seems to not be tolerated as well if we have just 2 large meals a day. Most people do better with, 6 times a day of eating. So that might look like breakfast and then a mid-morning snack, lunch and afternoon snack, and then dinner and an evening snack. Definitely looks different for everybody, but it seems that the smaller but more frequently we eat, the better our body is able to tolerate that.
Does sodium affect blood pressure, and how?
Yes, and I'm pretty sure more sodium raises your blood pressure.
We shouldn't be consuming a bunch of sodium just because it is in a lot of things. And I know it can hurt our cardiovascular system.
Yeah, sodium does affect blood pressure. I don't know the exact details on it, but I know that it's definitely not good for it in high amounts.
Excess sodium can raise blood pressure. Ultimately, what happens there, and in our country, we do tend to eat too much sodium. It's a preservative, so it's found in a lot of our foods. If we overconsume sodium, a good phrase that I like to use with my students and clients is that water follows sodium. So if we're over-consuming sodium, that can draw water into the body and the bloodstream, which then increases blood pressure as well. So that's kind of the mechanism that goes on with sodium and blood pressure. And even further beyond that, it also starts to have an impact on our hormone levels that regulate fluid balance and blood pressure as well.
What is the recommended daily water intake for adults?
Oh, so we learned about this. For women, it's usually around 9 cups, and for men, it's around 13.
I would say 2 liters. Water is very important for for all our metabolic processes in the body.
7 to 8 cups.
3 liters?
It varies so much depending on the individual, how much water we need. Some people hear their general recommendation of 8 cups of water per day. That's about 64 ounces. And that's a good general rule of thumb for most people. We usually recommend around 2 liters for a lot of people, which is around 70 ounces. Water has so many important functions within the body. So our blood's mostly made up of water. Water is also important for temperature regulation and some other important metabolic, processes within the body.
That was interesting and educational. My nutritional habits will change after watching that. How much did you know about nutrition before watching today's episode of What's Bruin? That's it for this episode of What's Bruin. For more What's Bruin, go to globeslcc.com or find us on facebook.com/slccsmc or on YouTube, Instagram, and X at SLCCSMC. I'm Mina Rivera. Spicy water is what's my cup. What's brewing in yours?